Welcome back to the Fox Den, everyone, a podcast series from West Shore Community College. We are reviewing the winter 2025 book of the semester, Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This episode, we discuss the final chapter of the book as a live panel recorded at the William M. Anderson Library on our main campus. We are joined in the Fox Den by co-host and library director, Patti Skinner, West Shore students, Grace Ashley and Jessie Blanchard, academic writing consultant, Lorynn Hackert, and professor of history and political science, Mike Nagle. I'm your co-host and professor of mathematics, Wade James. And now, our final live panel discussion of Klara and the Sun. The last time that we left Klara and Josie, there were dark skies and the sun broke through and came into the room. Melania, housekeeper, was trying to close the windows to keep the sun out, but yet it still came through. Klara was very determined to make sure that the sun got into the room, and it appears that Josie is now feeling better, that her health is starting to improve. And that's where we left off last time. In this section, we start to accelerate towards current time. There's been little hints throughout the story that these are flashbacks. This is Klara telling stories from her memory. And now we're starting to get caught up to real time. And so there's a series of events, sort of a number of curtain calls. Josie's father, Paul, kind of has his final appearance very briefly. Melania, housekeeper, has now left and gone somewhere else. We're not quite sure where. Mr. Capaldi and Chrissy have a final discussion. Klara has a final conversation with Rick. She also has a final conversation with Josie. And then at the end of this section, it closes with Klara's conversation with manager. You know who did not have a curtain call? Helen. Helen did not have a curtain call. And I think there's a reason why. I think Helen is somebody special and you really got to keep an eye on her. And so that's what transpires throughout this section.
As Wade just said, a lot of time has passed between the fifth and the sixth part of the book. And how has this time changed the relationships that Josie has with both Klara and with Rick?
Okay, Grace.
With their relationship, we can see that both of them start to separate from Josie. Maybe they're moving from one stage in life to the next, and they're at two different places and they just grow apart.
A lot of it too has to do with Josie being better, and so she's finally able to be independent in a way that she hadn't been able to be before.
That's a really good distinction to make, because in the end of chapter 5, Josie was feeling better, but it was very tentative. They didn't trust it. And here we're seeing Josie feeling completely healed.
It seems to me, one of the things that I was thinking with the book is that the purpose for Klara is to help the child that she's with. And one of the things that we see here is that she's gone from a child to an adult, and she's also better. And so her purpose is maybe a little bit unclear, or maybe she's actually fulfilled her purpose at this point, and so that really transforms that relationship.
As Wade alluded to, there's a lot of curtain calls, and Klara has her final conversation with Rick. What are some of your thoughts on this conversation?
Something that I took away, I guess, from their final conversation is Rick talks a lot about the love that Josie and I had was real, and he's trying to explain it to her, and she goes, I wonder what Rick can mean by that. I feel like it kind of shows that she won't ever get to that point of truly understanding those really nuanced, intimate relationships, and he tries to explain it more, and she didn't follow up. She says, after that, we stood there on the loose stones, not talking for a little while, and then he changed subject. So for me, it kind of solidified that idea of, does she understand people? And I think it just shows her observations are really great, but I don't know if she ever gets to that final understanding.
She does make a really good observation. With Josie, it's not what Josie brought that made her special. It was what the people around her brought that made Josie special. And I thought that was a keen insight from an AF, being able to say that it's not necessarily the person that's the spark plug that causes all these neat relationships to happen. It's how other people around them in their circle feel about that person. That's what makes somebody special. And I thought that was pretty good for an AF.
But pulling both of those things together, that she's observant, but does she really get at the complexities of the human heart and the rooms within the rooms? And could she have really understood all of that interpersonal relationship stuff? So I think you're both totally on track. Throughout this novel, plans have played an important role. Do you all think that humans are good planners?
I think it depends upon the human. I think that some people can make some plans that can be helpful. Klara had some plans for trying to help Josie become whole and for her to become healthy. And I don't know necessarily that her plans worked out. She thinks that they did, but I don't know. You know, as a reader, I think this is one of the things where you come to you draw your own conclusion there.
I don't know. I kind of like that idea of the impossible turned out to be possible and it happened. I do think that there's something to be said for being surrounded by loved ones in those kinds of moments that I think gives you some strength. So maybe the sun came out and it all just kind of happened to be like aligned.
I kind of bought into Dr. Jill Larson's theory that the healing conversation that Chrissy and Rick had right before that was the powerful switch that had taken place. Like that emotional conversation led to some healing for Josie. So what were some of the other plans that maybe went awry? So Rick and Josie had planned to be together forever,
Young love doesn't always work out.
but they always have a place in their hearts for one another.
If you look at Capaldi and the plan to essentially replace Josie, that really didn't pan out very well. Paul, the father, his plan to maybe get reintroduced to the family didn't work out. Helen's plan to get Rick meeting with Mr.
With the V.
V. You know, that didn't work out. That kind of blew up in her face. And so it seems like there's a lot of plans that went awry throughout the book. And everyone just kind of pivoted and went a different way.
I think it's good, you know, like Rick's, you know, the plan for Rick to go to college didn't work out, but it seems like everything is fine with him, even though the plan that his mother had, and he kind of decided to go along with, he became open to over time, didn't work out, but he seems to be in a safe place.
What did you all think about Klara being moved to the utility room and then Josie giving her a perch so that she's able to look out of the window?
I like this question. So I think everyone, if you like think back, probably has had a stuffed animal or like a baby blanket that like really brought them comfort at one point in their lives. And like, yeah, when you're going to college and you're packing all your stuff up, like you might come across that stuffed animal again and be like, I'm gonna put it on my bed and like give it a good warm spot while I'm gone. That is like the connection I made with putting Klara up on the perch so she could see out the window. So that's what I thought of it, is like still taking care of something that you know you're gonna leave behind though.
Yeah, it kind of just felt like she was like being pushed aside and she wasn't needed anymore for that comfort and for being someone to get rid of Josie's loneliness, because Josie was meeting with new people and she wasn't really needed anymore.
I felt that she made the nice area for her to be able to see because she felt guilty about leaving her behind.
It's almost hearkening back to the references that were made to Josie being like an appliance, or when if she was a vacuum, we would know how to ask to borrow the vacuum, or when she's positioned next to the refrigerator. And now she's kind of put away in this closet as if we're tidying up and this appliance is not useful any longer. So I think it was kind of bringing that full circle too. So we had our final curtain call from Mr. Capaldi. He came back and visited with Chrissy. What are your thoughts on his visit? And he kind of reveals that people are scared of AFs now and resentful towards them. And this seems like new information to Klara.
Maybe it's to the point where the AFs entered that uncanny valley where they got too close to emulating humans. And you see this a lot of times in animation and in movies. If you're watching a movie and it's animated and it looks not really well done, it's easier to suspend your disbelief and recognize that it's animated. But if it's too well done, the first time you see Polar Express, you're like, whoa, that's weird. That looks too human, right? And so maybe that's what happened with AFs, is they were continually to refine them, and they entered an uncanny valley, and now there's a little bit of a backlash to that. I often thought that the AFs would be connected wirelessly to a hub and get updates over the air like automobiles do now. So your automobile now gets an update over the air, or your phone gets an update, the AFs get an update, and they're updated with information from all of the AFs. So that way all the AFs are putting information on human behavior into the cloud, and then they all get the same update, which upgrades their firmware, and now they're a little bit more intelligent.
It sounds like the Borg.
The Borg, yeah.
Yeah. So with that,
Think of all the technology that we use right now. These computers up here, even the microphones. We were setting this up this morning, and the microphones had to have their firmware updated. Everything that we do has this update. So I think that AFs would be similar, and that they would probably be getting AI updates as they progressed.
I think he also helps to reinforce some of the things from earlier in the book, like the resentment that people had. Oh, these AFs are taking our seats in the theater, they're taking our jobs, things like that. And so Capaldi is trying to just understand them better, and he's coming from that sense.
Capaldi also brings up the distinction between the contribution that Klara could have made to their understanding of AFs or going into her slow fade. And Chrissy obviously chose a slow fade for Klara. Does that seem like the more generous of the two?
Yeah, Klara, she was willing to to contribute to the cause, but then Chrissy kind of took over and said that she should get her slow fade, and kind of humanized her more and made it seem like she had this right to just go out peacefully instead of being taken apart and picked apart.
It's almost like Klara didn't really have the mindset to agree to that sort of thing. Her mind's in an altered state at the moment, so I think Chrissy, she kind of just spoke for her in a way.
She's programmed to be this friend, right? She's almost programmed for that subservient role of I will be a good friend. And so it was maybe generous of Chrissy to offer her the slow fade and peacefully fading away.
Was anybody else bothered by this phrase, slow fade? I mean, I was really bothered by that.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I don't know. It's like you get old, your purpose is gone, and therefore you fade. And so we want to be really nice, and it's going to be a nice slow fade in a junkyard. For eventually, that's what happens, And so I was bothered by that phrase, even earlier in the book, but I don't know. Anybody else?
You would prefer a quick cut to a slow fade? That's it, you're done.
I think this comes back to our distinction for humanizing Klara. Is she more like us in her resembling a human, or is she more like an appliance or like a childhood toy that has outlived its usefulness? So if we apply too much human emotion and humanize Klara, then we feel really bad for her.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But if she's like a vacuum, do you feel bad for your vacuum? Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes.
Well, slow fade is also what the sun does, right? As it's setting, it slowly fades away. Kind of like that. So.
Nice, Wade. Wow, that was good.
It also kind of felt like Chrissy was trying to hold on to Klara longer because she was already losing Josie, because Josie was going off to college, and so she didn't want so much change. So maybe that's why she tried to choose this slow fade for Klara instead of letting Capaldi take her.
Yeah, I think Chrissy's relationship with Klara is very complicated, because originally Klara was brought in with the anticipation of replacing Josie. That was Chrissy's decision. And it started right from the very onset when they first met in the store, when she asked Klara to mimic Josie's walk. And so Chrissy is anticipating that Klara is going to replace Josie, and now the story changes. Josie gets better, and you have Klara that is still in the household, and the relationship with Chrissy, has it changed? Does she still harbor resentment from the decision that she made, having Klara replace Josie? Kind of that constant reminder. And so I think there's a lot there between the relationship between Chrissy and Klara.
That would make me want to tuck her in a closet.
Yeah.
So Mike had alluded to Klara being kind of put in the junkyard, which is more kindly referred to as the yard. So while there, we kind of see her memories start to overlap. What did you guys take from that time that she spent at the yard?
I mean, I think it solidifies that she is an unreliable narrator. She kind of admits, like, her memories are starting to overlap, but she can still kind of distinguish them apart if she tries.
Did anybody ever think, that she might be in a situation like that? I mean, was that a big surprise? It was a huge surprise for me. I did not see that coming.
That she was in the yard?
Yeah, or that she was in a situation like that at all. That was a big surprise for me.
Yeah, I didn't really expect that either, because they would just scrap her like that. I would think maybe they would just let her stare out at the window or something until she faded.
Why did you guys think that Klara chose loneliness for herself? When she's in the yard, she has the opportunity to go be with other AFs during her slow fade, but she chooses to stay in her own spot by herself. Why do you think she is choosing loneliness?
It seemed like to me that she just wanted to kind of enjoy and reflect her memories, how accurate they are or not, I don't know, but just enjoy those before, I think, the end. I don't know if she knew that the end was coming or not, but yeah, I think she wanted to just kind of reflect and look.
I also agree. I think she was just trying to understand her life in a way.
This question made me think of at the beginning of the book when they first got the newer models, how they were kind of being rude to the older AFs because they thought they were superior, and I'm pretty sure in the junkyard they said it was the newer models that were there too, so maybe she wasn't comfortable going to talk to the newer models because of that memory of how they were rude to the older AFs. So I thought about that.
And maybe Klara has come to terms with her loneliness and accepted it. And instead of having a fear of missing out, she now has a joy of missing out. Let me just hang out by myself here and be cool and enjoy the birds and the sun. And that's all right too.
Klara is finding she's not alone because she's with all of those memories, and everything that's most important to her is already captured in those.
This is what I love about Common Read. We've got different people coming from different perspectives, so much more sophisticated than where I was coming from. Because I'm just saying, well, she was programmed to do something. She had a job. She completed her job, so she's good. And so, I mean, that is what you had to say was so much more articulate. But that's just where I was coming from.
So in our final scene, Klara is interacting with the manager. It's kind of coming full circle. The manager seeks her out in the yard and was really hoping to find Klara. She still had a special place for her. So what are our takeaways from that final interaction with the manager?
This part also seemed like a kind of a shock to me because I didn't expect it to make a full circle back to where she started with the manager and seeing her again, because I kind of forgot about the manager at this point in the book because we were with Josie and the mom and all of that, and then she comes back and she sees the manager sees how this AF did, and she felt kind of connected to this one more because she was deemed special. I thought it was a really good way to just bring the whole book together at the end.
I also found it really weird that the manager was there because we only know it as the yard. In my mind, I was just kind of thinking, is this a scrap yard for the business that they had, the manager's business? Because it just didn't really make much sense why the manager would just come to a random junkyard,
I saw it a lot as a teacher-student relationship, where the manager being the teacher at the beginning and Klara being the student, and the manager is trying to teach Klara proper things to do, how to behave with the son and what things mean, and then the lesson is done, the student goes out into the world, learns all these things, and now here's the teacher searching for other students. The manager also had said that she had found Rosie, remember Clara's first buddy back in the store. And so manager apparently hangs out in these places and is seeking these things and is interested in how the AFs that she educated went out into the world and how they performed. And she very much uses language in this scene that I felt if I ran into a former student that had done something amazing And I would want to talk to them and say, oh, I'm so glad that you did this. I always knew there was something special about you. You had a thirst for knowledge and you really wanted to go out and do stuff. And so I'm so glad to see you. And I really felt like that's why manager pulled up a chair and sat down and had a conversation. A teacher reconnecting with a former student and wanted to find out things. And then it was time to go on.
So our final image is of the crane, and that's how the book ends. Do you all feel satisfied with this ending?
Is it supposed to symbolize like cranes can be used to destroy things, to build, or to deconstruct? And so that's the thing that got to me. I was like, oh, well, is there something new that's being constructed now because there's a crane? What was I satisfied? I thought it was fine, but I didn't know what it meant. And so there's people that are so much smarter than me that can help me understand something like that. So sorry.
The ending?
Here we go. See?
What does it mean, Lauren?
What does
Yeah.
it mean? I don't know. But the ending for me with that image of the crane, it made me sad because Klara thought for a minute oh, is she turning around to look at me? But then she's like, oh no, she's just looking at the crane behind me. I kind of was like, okay, then why do I feel sad? Because manager isn't sad. So what does that mean? Is it that they are appliances and that's an understanding among the people in the book? So do we as readers have more of an emotional connection with Klara by the end of it than her people do? And what does that mean?
Yes.
You're asking
So-
much better questions than me.
Yes. And I think that's very intentional.
Yeah,
That
probably.
we're so enamored with Klara. We've fallen for her, and we have attributed so much more to her than the other humans in her life.
Well, I thought I felt super smart reading the crane part. I was thinking cranes lift people up, so Clara's probably getting lifted up, but then you're getting dropped back down. Once you get picked up by the crane, you're just going to get scrapped right after, so.
The duality of cranes.
I didn't really understand the reference to the crane either, but I did like the ending where she met with manager again, but then the crane, it just kind of confused me.
I kind of saw it as a full circle from the beginning of her time in the store. She could see construction and cranes, and then her ending with that crane still in view. She was still enjoying the view. So I thought it was another kind of moment of closure, which this section was full of.
I thought about what happens internally, Klara reflecting at the end, and her choosing loneliness, and that way I think it's almost an internal and external thing that you gotta make one at some point, turning your loneliness into solitude.
Can technology help us overcome loneliness? Klara was so successful as an AF. She was prized by the manager. I feel like she fulfilled her role really well. Her plan was the one that worked, ultimately. All these humans had plans that didn't work in the end. And her plan of Josie getting well is the only thing that actually came through in the end. But I do think that technology can help us to overcome loneliness.
You could also take the perspective that Klara was not brought in for Josie, but for Chrissy. Chrissy is really starting to have anxiety about being lonely again. She's lost her husband. She's lost her first child. She's now on the verge of losing her second child. And the meeting with Mr. Capaldi to get Klara to act and behave and model Josie, it feels like Clara's role is not necessarily for Josie, but more for Chrissy. And then once Josie gets well, now Clara's role is diminished. And so I think that happens in parallel. I think there is a little bit of Josie being lonely because she's so sick and isn't able to attend all these social gatherings and things like that. But you could also look at it from the perspective of Chrissy. I think Chrissy just needs to hang out with Helen more, and then things would be all right.
Yeah, I feel like the book showed a lot of different examples of loneliness. When Josie's with her lifted friends, Rick feels lonely. He doesn't quite fit in there. And then with Chrissy losing her kids and feeling lonely about that. And then at the end, Clara's lonely, but then they show different ways in which loneliness can be fixed. With Rick, he finds his own crowd of people. And Chrissy, she comes to terms with she can't just replace her kid. And then with Klara, she finds the solitude peaceful, and she is just going through her memories, and she has that time to kind of meditate, look within herself. And
So if anything, it kind of shows that everyone can deal with loneliness in different ways, and that there's not necessarily one solution
Yeah.
for addressing loneliness. That different people have different ways of addressing loneliness, and maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I think the AF was like the tool. Klara wasn't alleviating the loneliness all by herself. She was facilitating other people, helping Josie.
I wonder if sometimes what we can get at with loneliness is at times in our lives we are lonely, and at times in our lives we need help. We might need help, whether it's artificial, we can then grow, but at times in our lives we might be lonely and we might need the help of others in order to overcome that.
You've been listening to The Fox Den, a podcast series from West Shore Community College. This has been our discussion of the winter 2025 book of the semester, Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro.
Thank you so much for joining us. That's our podcast. I'm Patti Skinner.
And I'm Mike Nagle.
And I'm Grace Ashley.
And I'm Jessie Blanchard.
And I'm Lorynn Hackert.
And I'm Wade James.
Shout out Professor Erwin Salimos, because my understanding of this book was because of his class.
Shout out to Craig Peterson for setting this up for us. He set up the mics and the recording.
This is just like when I went to the Late Show with Stephen Colbert.